In 1993, the quiet town of West Memphis, Arkansas, was rocked by a horrific crime: the brutal murders of three 8-year-old boys, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch. Their bodies were found in a drainage ditch in Robin Hood Hills, bound with their own shoelaces. The sheer brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, and the pressure to find those responsible was immense. 3 local teenagers were soon arrested and charged with the murders: Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie Misskelley Jr. They would become infamously known as the West Memphis Three. But the real question remains: did they actually commit the crime, or were they victims of a flawed investigation fueled by fear, bias, and the infamous Satanic panic of the 1990s? This case is a tale of missteps, coerced confessions, and evidence that didn't add up. As we delve into the details, you'll be left wondering: did justice truly prevail, or were 3 innocent teenagers wrongfully convicted? On May 5, 1993, the families of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie reported them missing after they failed to return home from a bike ride. The next day, a police search led to a grim discovery. Their bodies were found submerged in a muddy ditch. They had been stripped naked, tied up with their own shoelaces, and left to die. Initial reports suggested that the boys had been horribly abused, with signs of mutilation. This detail would later play a crucial role in shaping the public's perception of the crime, leading many to believe it was the result of a ritualistic killing linked to satanic cults, a belief that played directly into the growing satanic panic hysteria of the time. But the crime scene investigation was flawed from the start. Evidence was mishandled, and contamination of the crime scene was inevitable. Officers left footprints, evidence wasn't properly collected, and crucial clues were ignored. These early mistakes would have far-reaching consequences as the case developed. As pressure mounted to solve the crime, police turned their attention to 3 local teenagers: Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie Misskelley Jr. The reason? Damien Echols had a reputation for wearing black clothing, listening to heavy metal music, and being fascinated by the occult, traits that were considered suspicious during the Satanic panic. But how did Jessie Misskelley Jr., a 17-year-old with an IQ of about 70, get involved? Police interrogated Misskelley for 12 hours without a lawyer or parent present, a clear violation of his rights. During this interrogation, Jessie made a confession after hours of coercive questioning. But here's the rub: only 46 minutes of the 12-hour interrogation were recorded. His confession was riddled with inconsistencies. He first claimed the crime happened in the morning, then changed it to noon, then to evening. But the boys were last seen at 6:30 p.m. Detectives asked him leading questions, and Jessie, under intense pressure, went along with their narrative. His confession was later used to implicate Baldwin and Echols. Misskelley quickly recanted his statement, but the damage was done. In the eyes of the public and the jury, it was as good as a signed confession of guilt. The trial of the West Memphis Three resembled a scene from a Hollywood courtroom drama. The prosecution leaned heavily on the satanic ritual theory, using Damien Echols' interest in the occult and heavy metal music as evidence of his guilt. Witnesses testified that Echols had talked about committing the crime, but these witnesses were later discredited as unreliable. There was no physical evidence directly linking the 3 teens to the crime scene. The prosecution presented fibers found on the victims that allegedly could have come from the teens' clothing. However, experts later argued that these fibers were common and could have come from anyone. The public watched in horror as the trial unfolded. The media sensationalized every detail, reinforcing the narrative of evil teenagers committing a ritualistic murder. Baldwin and Misskelley were sentenced to life in prison, while Echols, considered the ringleader, received the death penalty. Years later, the West Memphis Three were still behind bars, but cracks began to appear in the prosecution's case. In 2007, new DNA testing revealed something startling. None of the DNA found at the crime scene matched Echols, Baldwin, or Misskelley. Instead, one DNA sample matched Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather. There was also a hair linked to David Jacoby, a friend of Hobbs, found on a tree stump near the crime scene. Neither Hobbs nor Jacoby were ever named as suspects, but these findings raised new questions. If the West Memphis Three didn't commit the crime, who did? How did hair linked to Stevie's stepfather end up at the crime scene? Some believe Hobbs may have been involved, while others suggest it was pure coincidence. By the early 2000s, the case of the West Memphis Three had caught the attention of celebrities including Johnny Depp, Eddie Vedder, and Peter Jackson. The HBO documentary Paradise Lost also played a critical role, exposing flaws in the investigation and raising questions about the validity of the convictions. The public began to demand justice, and organizations like the Innocence Project pushed for a review of the case. This increased pressure eventually led to the creation of the Alford plea. In 2011, after 18 years behind bars, Echols, Baldwin, and Misskelley were allowed to enter into this unique plea agreement, maintaining their innocence while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. With the plea bargain, they were released. But while the West Memphis Three walked free, their names were never fully cleared. To this day, the West Memphis Three remain symbols of wrongful conviction. Some people firmly believe that the three teenagers were innocent, victims of a flawed justice system fueled by fear and hysteria. Others still believe they were guilty and managed to game the system with the help of high-profile supporters. The case also raises deeper questions about the dangers of public perception in criminal cases. If you wear black clothes and like heavy metal music, does that make you a suspect? If you have a low IQ and crack under pressure, does that make your confession reliable? The case of the West Memphis Three illustrates how coercive interrogation, media sensationalism, and public hysteria can affect the outcome of a trial. Their story isn't just about murder, it's about justice, the power of perception, and the need for reform. Since her release, Damien Echols has become a public figure and advocate for criminal justice reform. He has written books, given interviews, and shared his story with the world. Jason Baldwin has dedicated his life to helping others facing wrongful convictions. Jessie Misskelley has largely stayed out of the public eye, preferring a quiet life away from the spotlight. Meanwhile, questions about the real killer remain unanswered. Could Terry Hobbs have been involved? Or is it possible that another suspect has been overlooked all these years? The debate continues, and the story of the West Memphis Three is far from over. If you found this story compelling and want more compelling true crime content, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We bring you the stories that keep you up at night and make you question everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned, stay curious, and remember, not every case is as open and shut as it seems.